Let's talk pharmaceuticals. Meristem Securities has a new report out that has a positive look at the pharmaceutical sector in Nigeria. They feel that it is poised for growth. It's a really good report, about 43 pages long. And any moment now, we're going to have the cover of that report so you can look at it. Any moment now. But pharmaceutical, there it is. Healthy Horizons, Nigerian pharma sector positioned for growth. Lovina Okoro is an investment research analyst at Meristem Securities. She joins us to tell us exactly how the pharmaceutical sector is positioned for growth. Lovina, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Usually it's the end. We usually ask this question at the end of, to get an outlook. But great report, and you guys do very good work at Meristem. How is the pharmaceutical sector positioned for growth?
First, it's due to few reasons. First is the government's push for local production.
Okay.
The Nigerian pharmaceutical market is fragmented. We have several players, and the majority of these players are importers, right, and multinationals, and about 30% are local producers, right? So the government is trying to enlarge that space. Let's have more local producers, and one of the initiatives the recent initiatives that the government took, it's the waiver on pharmaceutical imports, pharmaceutical products, supplies, medical supplies, and all of that, to encourage these local players. And another thing now, we've observed this trend with local producers, right? They have been upscaling, right? Expanding their production capacity, right? And recently, we've also seen major players like Fitsin and Enzo try to invest, to have production plants for APIs. So APIs are essential core ingredients, right, for producing
a number of medications.
Right? So, and we are trying to have, let's have our own production plant. These APIs, they are wholly imported. Right? So these factors are, among many. We also have this increasing awareness of, health consciousness. We're having
exercise.
Yeah.
Eating healthy.
Yeah. We are having different talk shows, health talks, right? Yeah. So it's bringing this increasing awareness of health. This is also translating to increased demand for pharmaceutical products. So all of these factors put in place, we believe that the healthcare space is positioned for growth.
Great, thank you for that. Now, my favorite part is always the charts. So you have a chart here where you've overlaid growth in the pharmaceutical sector's real GDP growth for the rest of the country. So it's outpaced it. So talk us through this chart. You have, which is for our viewers, the light green line at the top is the chemical and pharmaceutical products, and then you've got GDP growth for the rest of the country in dark black at the bottom. So explain the rise up to 2022 and then the fall. What happened there?
Yeah, so that's from 2022, that growth that we saw there, it's, COVID.
Okay.
During COVID, it's brought, that enlightenment, that increased awareness for health as well. And we saw increased demand for supplies like masks, gloves, painkillers, all of that. Those were also some of the symptoms of the virus at the time. So it's, the increased demand for these products. Even now, we know if we look at in 2022, that moderation that we saw was due to supply disruption, Russia-Ukraine war, right? And most of these ingredients for pharmaceutical productions, they are imported, right? So it impacted the growth at that time. Now moving to 2023, flotation of the naira, inflation,
fuel
subsidies, all of that impacted, they are the headwinds, coupled with the exit of GSK and Sanofi as well, right? So it came as a industry headwinds for the industry. That was what impacted that growth that we saw there.
Great stuff. You started out talking about how the federal government wants to localize production. of pharmaceutical items. You have a chart that looks at the allocation of the budgets towards healthcare. I mean, and your report did note, if we look all the way to 2025, that, I mean, there was a, what was it? Was it 85% increase to 2.4 trillion or so from 1.3? So is this satisfactory, or this healthcare allocation, these bars need to be much taller, much higher?
Actually, so looking at the figure now, you know, we're having around 2.48 trillion now. It's looking significant compared to the 1.38 trillion last year, but like you mentioned, it's still less than 10%. It's hovering around 5% of the total budget, and this is even less than the target, because in 2001, African leaders, they came together to meet and said, okay, let's improve our healthcare delivery, right? And they said, okay, let's ensure that we have about 15% of our budget allocation to healthcare. But currently, it is still less than 15%, still hovering around 5%. And if we look at it with inflation, allocating to infrastructures, before we go to salaries and all of that, down to production of pharmaceuticals as well, this fund is not enough. So it's definitely not still enough to cover the needs. You know, we have Nigeria as a whole, the huge population that we have to ensure that everyone have, you know, quality access to healthcare. So looking at this figure is still not quite enough. Gotcha. Makes perfect sense.
Now, you've already touched on this, so maybe we'll just jump ahead. But you've got two charts, one on inflation, and then the other on the foreign exchange unification. Right. No, I do want to ask you this, because I really like this chart. I love it when, we have AI now that can do this stuff. I love doing it manually. But anyway, we've seen the parallel and official rates pretty much come together. Inflation seems to be moderating. What's your outlook, I guess, for the impact on the sector if these stay stable?
Okay. Well, looking at it, it's still quite expensive to getting this product, especially APIs, like I've mentioned, right? And for context, let's use fixing, for example. So in 2024, their cost of production increased about 64%.
Jesus, that's a lot.
And bringing it to Q1, it went about 100%.
Wow.
Yes. So that is the impact of this FX, right? They need FX, right, to get this products, to get the inputs, production inputs, right? And it is impacting not their margins as well, right? And looking down again to exchange rates, let's use fixing, for example. They had exchange losses. It went, I think 2024, it went to about 400% loss to about 5 billion, right? But in Q1, it's moderated. Okay. So we had it at about 400 million compared to about 1.2 billion in the previous year, right? And while exchange rate is stabilizing, what that does, it helps them better plan, right? So imagine, I have it in my books that, okay, I'm going to get this at 1,500, but you are going to the market and it is maybe 150, that's volatility. So what this stabilization does for them, it helps them better plan.
Gotcha. We have an MPC decision later today. The expectation, we just had a prior guest was saying that likely that may hold 27.5% is the benchmark rate. I take it that a higher elevated benchmark interest rate increases borrowing costs so can you talk through that? I guess is that part of some of the operational costs that they face?
Yes, exactly, yes. So like I mentioned, with in order to combat inflation with the fuel subsidies and we had a series of rate hikes, right? And in 2024 alone, most of the companies, for companies even under coverage, finance costs increased about over 100%. Wow, because they have to rely on maybe bank loans, especially in the face of them trying to expand, right? So they need these funds, and like I mentioned, it's also impacting their margins. This high borrowing costs. And looking at it, even it is still a factor to consider with the MPC's decision if they hold rates. It still also means that borrowing costs will still
remain high.
Yeah, remain high.
Yeah. Hey, it's just one. Everything is interconnected, right? Okay, so exchange rates, borrowing costs, inflation, all this. I guess you put all into the operational costs and everything for these businesses. I like this chart. What's the trend here? I mean, of course, it's rising. Do you see that? I guess, going forward, and also, can you talk about electricity? I mean, as we look at these industry production and operational costs and that impact as well.
Yeah. No, electricity, I mean, for businesses, we definitely need power, to run. And for this type of companies where, for cooling, for storage, they need power. And it is also like a major driver of their operating activities. And, even when we have inconsistent power supply, they also have to rely on diesels, solar to power their operations, their generators and all that they need. So with the highest electricity tariff, so all of that is still going to be a significant driver for their operating expenses.
Your report talked about the exit of some, multinational pharmaceutical firms. You mentioned, GSK and Sanofi and so on. Have the local players been able to close that gap? Is that a challenge to them? How do you think the indigenous, more nimble, smaller players in the sector, I mean, one would expect they could take advantage of that, but then you're trying to fill the shoes of some really big companies. So how do you see that dynamic working out?
Like in 2023, when all of that happened, it came as a headwind for the industry, supply shortages and all of that. But it also presented an opportunity for them, to expand and all of that. So we can't say they've completely filled that gap, but we've seen players like Mecure
listing on the exchange.
Yes, and even producing, like for GSK now, is known also for its antibiotics, augmentin. So we've seen Mecure also come in to play in that space, expand product portfolios as well. So I believe with time, right, we can, but currently we've not fully captured, that space. All
right. So I guess if one is to ask you just to summarize, what needs to happen to manufacture our own, pharmaceutical items here at home? It's a combination of what? Power, the business environment, and exchange, foreign exchange, and so on.
And most importantly, the APIs.
Right.
So if we can have, just like most of these companies are pushing to do MZO-15, if we can have our own base, right, our own API production plant, it would be a huge relief for the industry, having to depend on foreign importers and having to avoid supply shocks, supply chain destruction and all of that. Yes, and if we can also have like the government, continue to play in to support the industry, right? The industry players, I mean, we will get to
the promised land.
Place.
The pharmaceutical promised land. Lovina Okoro, thank you so much for joining us. Investment Research Analyst with Meristem Securities. I encourage everybody to download the report. It is very in-depth, about 43, 45 pages. Really good work. Thank you so much for talking to us.